according to CDC statistics, are around 40% of hospitalized cases include those aged between 20 and 54 years old. Now, we also heard a lot of debate around medical supplies. There is a clear lack of PPE, protective clothing for health workers at the moment. Donald Trump and the Vice President Mike Pence said that they would be making 500 million masks eventually available, but they are not there yet. And the CDC is telling those that just can't get their hands on them to start using whatever material they can to make makeshift masks, Dermot.
OK, Cordelia, many thanks. Cordelia Lynch there in Washington. And this is Sky News Tonight. Coming up, government plans to use mobile phone data to see if people really are social distancing.
States and working very closely with them to ensure that movements can still continue for the most critical of emergency cases, wherever that's possible.
As panic over the pandemic spreads around the world, refugees and the internally displaced are, as always, just trying to survive. People long accustomed to uncertainty, for whom life has suddenly become an even greater challenge. Mohammed Jamjoom, Al Jazeera.
Well, Iraq's begun a week-long lockdown in an attempt to slow the spread of the virus there. Iraq has confirmed 12 deaths from the virus and has more than 160 cases. Soldiers have been deployed in the capital, Baghdad, with police setting up checkpoints. The city of Najaf, a pilgrimage site for hundreds of thousands of Shia Muslims each year, was becoming a ghost town. Well, Simona Fulton has more from Baghdad, where the lockdown is having severe implications for many Iraqis because they can't work from home.
It is the second day of a week-long curfew here in Iraq's capital, Baghdad, and we are at what is usually a very busy intersection in Baghdad's Mansour neighborhood. But as you can see, the streets are largely deserted. There are checkpoints that have been set up by the security forces to enforce the movement restrictions. They're demanding badges from any cars that are moving around to justify their movement. Of course, we as journalists, we are exempt from the curfew, as are healthcare workers. But for many other people, these movement restrictions will have a great impact on their livelihood. The majority of Iraqis are employed in the informal sector, be it as shopkeepers, as taxi drivers, and this curfew means that they can't get out to earn a living. You can see on my left side over here the shops that remain entirely closed. This means that those shopkeepers will be taking a great hit in terms of the income that they're making. And anybody associated, of course, with those shops will not be earning a salary. Now, the Corona Crisis Committee in Iraq has said that this curfew is the only way to try to manage the crisis in the country, because the concern is that Iraq's healthcare sector, under the best of circumstances, is not equipped to deal with very large volumes of patients. Last year, the government allocated less than 3% of its budget to the healthcare sector, and the hospitals are already struggling because they're underfunded, they're understaffed, they're undersupplied. So the idea is to try to prevent a sharp rise in cases. But of course, as this curfew continues, and there is a chance it may be extended, the economic ramifications of these movement restrictions may be severe.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has ordered the country's 1.3 billion population to follow a one-day curfew on Sunday to combat the pandemic. The curfew will be enforced from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. as a test of the nation's ability to go effectively into lockdown.
The coronavirus crisis is very hard to control. There are many big countries that are suffering, so anyone who thinks it won't affect India is wrong.
Well, Elizabeth Puranam is in New Delhi.
Now, over the last week, things here have
2020 has opened up a window for domestic league fixtures to be completed over the summer if strict restrictions on travelling and mass gatherings are lifted in time. According to reports, the English authorities are putting no limit of when the 2019-2020 campaign must be finished by, a relief for leagues still hoping to finish the season once play can be restarted. Andy Rubini for Euronews.
Thanks very much for watching this edition of Euronews Tonight. Plenty more of our top stories, Euronews.com.
President. This is Gretchen Whitmer from Michigan.
Hi, Gretchen.
I'd like to be on the call with you. I want to thank you for the policy on the Canadian border. Michigan relies on a lot of medical care professionals coming across that border, and so grateful that it was a thoughtful policy.
Good.
And, you know, I'm not going to waste your time echoing all the comments my colleagues have made, though I see the wisdom, and I'm grateful that they've made them. I wanted to just quickly touch on the auto industry. Obviously, coming from Michigan, my colleagues across the country also have serious investments from the auto industry, and we're concerned about liquidity up and down the supply chain and all of the great people that have made the backbone of our economy hum for so long. And I'm just hopeful that as conversations happen around industry, and we will keep this important sector front and center, because we are concerned about ensuring that they have got some paths out to and back to prosperity as well.
Well, thank you very much. You're right, 100%. We're watching the auto industry very much. We're going to be helping them out at least a little bit, and they've sort of requested some help, and it wasn't their fault what happened. So we'll be taking care of the auto industry, and I appreciate it very much, your comments. Thank you. All right, next governor, please.
Thank you.
Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, this is Governor J.B. Pritzker from Illinois. I wanted to first express my gratitude to your staffs and to others working in the administration who we've interacted with. They've really done yeoman work in being responsive to us. And thank you, Mr. Vice President, for returning calls to us as we've needed more help with answers to questions about testing. And actually, that's why I wanted to ask a question today. We understand that there is drive-through testing that's being.
So tomorrow morning means showers around the east of England and western.
Descending into a new normal. Central London on a weekday morning. Commuters replaced by last-minute shoppers as coronavirus fears grow. It's a crisis that could well require a significant military response, Britain's last line of defence.
From a UK national perspective, we are dealing with a crisis of its scale and in its nature that we've not seen in peacetime. And we need to remember that for 30 years, we've not had to think about our national resilience. So we're beginning to find out just how brittle we are.
Up to 20,000 service personnel, including reservists, will be put on standby to help provide this resilience. It's a doubling of the normal strength. They'll be called the COVID Support Force. The plans being drawn up in this building could see the military providing life-saving support during this crisis. Dozens of troops are already being trained as tanker drivers to deliver oxygen supplies, and officers are looking at ways to expand hospital bed capacity for the public. Options range from possibly converting hotels or barracks to using tented field hospitals and even military ships. Even with coronavirus a priority, the military must also keep defending Britain's skies, maintain a nuclear deterrent submarine at sea, and fight Islamic State. But COVID-19 is a threat to troops as well. Some could be isolated for their own protection or quarantined.
Seen that by mid-February. We should see the hospitals already being loaded in ED departments. We should see not just 22 people, we should see a lot more. And we should have not just 2 deaths, unfortunately we have 2 already, we should see a lot more. So one of the aspects of the model says, okay, where are you at? You take the theoretical and put it into the real data and say, is there a match or not? If it isn't, why isn't it? And that's the question we want to ask to say, because that tells you, is what you're doing, is it working or not working? And most of the time you're only talking about one event. But the way we are, Canada, and Toronto especially, and the GTA, in this global reality, we don't have just one community here, we have multiple. And so we went through, and because our issue with China, Wuhan, and Hubei province is that we had 5,000 people a day going back and forth, all through December, all through January, all through March and February. March it dropped down, I'm wrong. We should have seen, because it already was, we had our first case in January, but they're already ramping up big time in China in December, very big time in November. And so why didn't we see? And then that calmed down. And then we had the whole event with Iran and Italy. And even the people didn't know exactly when it started, and the country didn't announce the 19th, although people said it was already happening a week before that. We had people going back and forth. We have one of the largest communities here outside of the country. Significant movement. And the people weren't advised. They didn't know. So we should have seen it again. Now we have another challenge. And so we're not fortunate to have only one event that's going to impact us. We're moving through each event. And our public health units, with our containment thing, have done an immense amount of fantastic work tracking all these people down, contacting, phoning contacts. And it's just a huge amount of work. And especially some of the large ones initially, like Toronto and around the GTA, have had the majority of the work to do. And that's no end to the amount of workforce involvement and hours of calling and correcting. I think that's kept us intact for the first two. Can we continue? And that's our challenge. That's why we said we can't just depend on that alone. We have to have the social distancing. We have to declare an emergency. We have to close the schools and that, because that kind of number coming back, I myself, I can't say that public health alone can hold that line on that totally. We just don't have that kind of workforce in there. But if we put these checks and balances in place, if we ask people, and people adhere to isolation, if people adhere to social distancing, that 14-day period, and still assessing cases, and there will be some more sick patients, and there will be hospitalizations.
An outbreak of coronavirus infections in the Wuhan province of China in December 2019 is threatening to emerge as the next pandemic. At current count, over 40,000 cases and 600 deaths have been reported in China and over 300 cases in 25 other countries. Unofficial modeling studies by a number of institutions claim infections of over 150,000. The alarming speed of transmission is in part because the virus spreads through the air and by touch. Using the power of 3D medical animation, this video covers what is a pandemic, how this coronavirus is spreading, how coronavirus attacks the body, and what are recommended precautions to take for protecting against epidemics. Pandemics indicate outbreaks of disease that spread to cover an entire region or the world. A pandemic can result in massive loss of life. In the last 100 years, there have been 4 global pandemics, the worst with the 1918 influenza pandemic, resulting in an estimated 50 to 100 million deaths. While no global pandemic has been born from the family of coronavirus, 2 regional epidemics have resulted from this family of viruses. They include severe acute respiratory syndrome, or SARS, and Middle East respiratory syndrome, or MERS, in 2001 to 2003 and 2012 to 2015, respectively, and resulted in over 1,500 deaths. Much is yet to be known about the 2019 novel coronavirus. An early study of 99 infected showed a high mortality of 11%, similar to SARS, and ICU admission rates of 23%. An earlier study described a virus pathology with an 8-day incubation period, a week of infection, followed by a potential escalation to hospitalization and intensive care over another 8 to 10 days. Other indications put the mortality rate closer to 4%. The virus has, as of February 6th, over 40,000 confirmed cases in China alone, with almost 200 cases in over 25 other countries. However, Dr. Jonathan Reed from the UK believes that the numbers of actual cases is far greater and has estimated between 170 to 300,000 by February 9th. This is because symptoms can be mild and escape reporting and testing. What's more, in stark contrast to SARS, some patients may be infectious in their incubation period before the onset of any symptoms. Mechanism of action of coronavirus. The 2019 novel coronavirus is a newly discovered strain from the coronavirus family that causes respiratory disease. Humans have long been infected by coronavirus, as it is one of those responsible for the common cold. It is a contagious viral infection spread through inhalation or ingestion of viral droplets. As a result, coughing and sneezing and touching infected surfaces are primary sources of infection. The structure of coronavirus has multiple parts. Inside the virus lies the genetic encoding that allows the virus to hijack human cells and turn them into virus factories. A protein encapsulates the genetic material known as the viral envelope. On the surface of the viron are S and HE proteins. The structure of the 2019 novel coronavirus is a mutation. For more information on this, see the link below. The large S glycoproteins are used by the virus to gain entry to human cells. They most likely attach to angiotensin-converting enzyme 2 receptors on the cell membrane, allowing the virus entry. The exact mechanism for this is not known. Most likely, as shown here, the human cell ingests the virus in a process known as endocytosis. Once inside the cytoplasm, the endosome opens to reveal the virus's genetic material, a single-stranded RNA. The virus hijacks the cell's machinery to replicate the RNA in N proteins and uses the endoplasmic reticulum to form its M protein outer layer and the all-important S protein. After replication, the virus is carried by the Golgi bodies out of the cell in a process known as exocytosis, so that it can infect other cells. Meanwhile, the stress of viral production on the endoplasmic reticulum eventually leads to apoptosis, or cell death. It should be noted that the mechanism of action for 2019 novel coronavirus is unknown. However, scientists in China have sequenced the genome, while others have used the sequencing to visualize the structure. There is currently no cure or vaccine for the 2019 novel coronavirus, and treatment is only supportive. Therefore, preventing transmission is paramount. As an airborne virus, recommended precautions are similar to those for preventing the flu. This includes washing hands regularly with soap and water for 20 seconds, covering sneezes and coughs with the inside of the elbow, refraining from touching high-contact surfaces like railings and doorknobs. If you use tissues, throw them away immediately. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. For more info on precautions and best practices, see the list of references below. The pandemic risk of the novel coronavirus is very real. However, biology has advanced greatly in the 15 years since SARS, and so has communication between biologists and governments. China has taken monumental efforts to contain the spread of the virus. Also, some existing and experimental drugs are offering hope for treating the infection and improving outcomes. But even still, infection control habits remain paramount if humanity is to stave off a full pandemic. For further information, see the resources listed here.
By now, you've probably heard of COVID-19, or coronavirus disease discovered in 2019, which is responsible for a global pandemic. Thus far, the main country affected
Now then, with so many people spending more time than usual at home and indoors, staying well physically and mentally has become even more important. And some gyms have already closed their doors, so the fitness industry is now offering online classes to people still wanting to work out. And Lucy Cotter has been looking at some of the ways of staying well in these unprecedented times.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to PE with Joe, my 30-minute PE lesson.
He's set to be the nation's self-styled PE teacher.
Good, nice and quick. So lifting those knees up.
Joe Wicks, with his millions of followers on social media, is intent on getting us all moving. And with schools closing, he's stepping in.
So I'm going to do a live workout, 9 a.m. All you've got to do is tune in. So, it'll pop up on YouTube on my channel, and you can take part with the kids, or you can just watch them and encourage them to do it. And it's going to really let out some steam, make them feel a little bit positive and a bit more optimistic, and I think everyone should get involved. I wanted to turn my living room into a studio, so this is what I'm doing on my live workouts. Come and check it out.
Joe's streaming sessions have been reaching people all over the world, and he plans to continue through the crisis.
Instagram, Facebook, YouTube live workouts. I stand right here and I do live sessions in front of millions of people. So it's all about, no equipment, just using your body, and it could be 15 minutes, 25 minutes. It really is enough to get you feeling good, and it's all about feeling energised, feeling motivated and positive, and we need that more than ever right now. And relax, perfect, good exercise. Well done, everybody.
Research shows that being outside with nature is really good for our physical and mental well-being. And current advice allows people who are well, without symptoms, to go for a walk as long as they stay at least 2 metres apart from each other. And with so many activities being cancelled, this is going to be increasingly important.
We can all be out getting exercise and coexisting without being within 2 metres or even, hundreds of metres of other people.
This just takes the pressure off, and then we can, regroup and get back inside. With the horses, we have a pretty good distance. That's all right.
Here we go. Mr. Motivator put us through our paces in the 90s and now works with the elderly to ensure they stay independent. And the message is the same for everyone.
I've got a wonderful thing called the curative power of exercise. The more you do it, the better you're going to feel. It's time out from everything. When you're doing exercise, no one can invade your space. You're going to feel so good.
The smiles on your face. Why? Because you're happy.
So regardless of age or ability, online or outside, exercising the body and mind is going to be essential. Lucy Cotter, Sky News.
And coming up next on Sky News tonight, the Prime Minister Boris Johnson calls on the country to follow the health advice to try to beat the coronavirus within the next 12 weeks, he says.
Connect. I think that this is the time for us to look inward and do that.
It's been wonderful being in the company of 3 doctors answering your questions on the stream. We appreciate you. Dr. Sarah Qureshi, Dr. James Hamblin and Dr. David Nabarro. All of the information will be on at JStream. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you next time.
Hey, selamat datang di tempat gue, kopimandalan.com. Tempat ini bukan sekedar online coffee shop biasa. Di sini
KLB itu tetap biaya diklaim ke dana tanggap darurat.
Saudara, informasi tadi menutup jumpa kita di Kilas Kompas edisi kali ini. Saya Mercy Tirayo undur diri, terima kasih. Sampai jumpa.
Saya Arizona Gali, Kompas TV, independen, terpercaya.
Otoritas Liga Sepak Bola Inggris segera tentukan masa depan Liga Inggris musim ini. Wabah virus corona yang semakin meluas, pesepak bola dunia kampanyekan Stay at Home Challenge. Gagal ikuti turnamen Australia petenis Aldila Suciadi fokus berlatih di tanah air. Halo, selamat malam Sport Lovers. Bagaimana kabarnya Anda malam hari ini? Selain 3 informasi tadi, kami juga telah merangkum beragam informasi olahraga lain yang kami hadirkan untuk menemani istirahat malam Anda. Bersama saya Tili Rea Bella, inilah Kompas Sport Malam di Kompas TV, independen, terpercaya. Sport Lovers, Otoritas Liga Sepak Bola Inggris atau EFL akan segera menentukan masa depan musim kali ini yang ditunda akibat pandemik virus corona atau COVID-19. Otoritas Liga Sepak Bola Inggris atau EFL menggelar pertemuan pada hari Rabu waktu setempat untuk membahas musim kali ini yang ditunda hingga 3 April mendatang. EFL sendiri mengatur 72 klub untuk tingkat kedua, ketiga, dan keempat sepak bola Inggris. Sementara itu Dewan Liga Premier Inggris akan segera menggelar rapat darurat dengan Asosiasi Sepak Bola Inggris FA hari Kamis waktu setempat. Opsi baru muncul menjelang pertemuan yang menyebutkan laga Liga Inggris akan dihelat di daerah netral dan tanpa penonton. Opsi ini mencuat setelah Badan Sepak Bola Eropa UEFA memastikan mengundur Piala Eropa 2020 ke tahun depan. Pengunduran ini memberikan celah bagi liga-liga domestik di Eropa untuk menyelesaikan musim ini meskipun tidak sesuai dengan jadwal semula. Di tengah krisis akibat virus corona di Italia, beberapa pemain Juventus menggalang pengumpulan dana untuk rumah sakit di Piedmont dan Turin. Gianluigi Buffon, Gonzalo Higuain, Danilo, dan Matthijs de Ligt ingin menunjukkan kepada dunia meski mereka jauh, tapi tetap bersatu untuk membantu sesama.
Anche io, insieme alla Juventus, sto partecipando alla raccolta fondi per gli ospedali di Torino e del Piemonte. Partecipa anche tu. Dimostriamo que siamo distanti ma uniti.
Hola, soy Gonzalo Higuaín y quería comunicarles que yo también, junto con la Juventus, estoy ayudando en la recaudación de fondos para todos los hospitales de Piemonte y de Torino. Hacelo también vos, porque aunque estemos separados, esta es una forma de mostrar que estamos más unidos que nunca. Fuerza y saldremos adelante.
Olá pessoal, eu também estou junto com a Juventus na arrecadação de fundos para os hospitais de Turim e Piemonte. Espero que você também possa contribuir. Vamos demonstrar que nós estamos à distância, porém unidos em favor dessa causa.
I too, together with Juventus, am supporting the fundraising for hospitals in Turin and Piedmont. You too can contribute. We show that we're all distant but united.
Para pemain Arsenal akan tetap pada jadwal semula. Mereka akan mulai kembali berlatih pada hari Selasa pekan depan. Sang pelatih Arsenal Mikel Arteta telah dinyatakan terinfeksi virus corona pada pekan lalu. Hal ini menjadi faktor utama yang membuat Liga Premier menangguhkan Liga hingga 3 April mendatang. Sejalan dengan himbauan pemerintah, seluruh pemain Arsenal, staf, serta ofisial menjalani isolasi secara mandiri selama 14 hari. Langkah ini diambil karena para pemain bekerja dalam jarak dekat dengan Arteta. Arteta sendiri menyatakan dirinya kini tengah dalam kondisi baik. Sport lovers bomber Paris Saint-Germain Neymar dikabarkan telah kembali ke kampung halamannya di Brazil. Dihentikannya sejumlah liga-liga di Eropa karena wabah virus corona, bomber milik PSG Neymar dikabarkan memilih pulang ke negeri kelahirannya Brazil. Menurut surat kabar Prancis Le Parisien, tak hanya Neymar, sang kapten raksasa Prancis Thiago Silva juga memilih untuk pulang ke negeri kelahirannya pada hari Senin waktu setempat. Sementara penangguhan gelar Ligue 1 Prancis masih terus berlanjut hingga batas waktu yang belum ditentukan. Tim asal Brazil Flamengo bisa bernafas lega melalui hasil tes ketiga. Sang pelatih kepala Jorge Jesus dinyatakan negatif virus corona. Di 2 hasil tes sebelumnya, pelatih berusia 65 tahun telah dinyatakan positif terjangkit virus corona. Namun melalui pernyataan pihak klub pada hari Rabu waktu setempat, peracik strategi asal Portugal belum dinyatakan positif. Kabar terbaru menyebut melalui tes ketiga, Jorge Jesus dinyatakan negatif virus corona. Flamengo mengucapkan terima kasih atas sejumlah dukungan yang diberikan kepada sang pelatih kepala. Sport lovers, akibat wabah virus corona yang semakin meluas, para atlet sepak bola pun absen dari lapangan hijau. Namun, mereka mensiasatinya dengan Stay at Home Challenge. Seperti apa? Mari kita simak tayangan berikut ini.
Legenda Arsenal Thierry Henry yang kini menjadi pelatih Montreal Impact Kanada bersama tim asuhannya turut menggencarkan kampanye tantangan tetap di rumah, Stay at Home Challenge. Tantangan ini dijalankan sehubungan dengan pandemi virus corona, sehingga masyarakat dihimbau tidak keluar rumah dan beraktivitas di rumah saja guna meminimalisir terdampak penyakit COVID-19. Stay at Home Challenge juga dijalani oleh para pemain bintang Paris Saint-Germain. Angel Di Maria aktif membagikan aktivitas juggling melalui akun Instagram pribadinya. Sementara sang striker Edinson Cavani memilih latihan rondo bersama anjing kesayangannya. Berbeda dengan kedua rekannya, Neymar lebih aktif di pusat kebugaran agar fisiknya tetap selalu fit. Pelatih klub Villarreal, Jose Romero, menganjurkan para pesepak bola untuk tidak berleha-leha dan menganggap ditundanya kompetisi sebagai waktunya berlibur. Meski setiap orang melakukan isolasi mandiri, latihan kebugaran tetap harus dilakukan.
La idea principal en estas semanas es que el jugador pierda lo menos posible el grado de condición física que tiene ahora. Entonces, para ello hemos hecho un plan individual para cada uno que vamos supervisando día a día.
Di tengah absennya kompetisi, Stay at Home Challenge setidaknya dapat mengobati kerinduan penggemar sepak bola, sekaligus mendorong para pesepak bola dapat menjaga kebugaran fisiknya.
Piala Dunia Senam Artistik dibatalkan karena pandemi virus corona. Selengkapnya kami hadirkan usai jeda. Tetaplah bersama kami di Kompas Sport Malam.
Pandang dan sikapi peristiwa dengan ilmu Islam. Awali dari hati untuk kehidupan lebih berarti.
Menata penampilan ini cukup atau hati juga perlu ditata nih Kang?
Nabi berkata, ad-din wan nasihah, bahwa agama Islam itu adalah nasihat buat hati kita.
Kalau hati, insya Allah sampai ke hati.
What was then an epidemic, the death toll was around 150. So what's happening in Italy is, despite all the series of restrictions that have been imposed upon 60 million plus people in the country, people are only allowed to go to a limited number of shops, pharmacies and food stores. We know that tens of thousands of people have also faced been in trouble with the police for flouting some of the restrictions, and now the authorities are even thinking about possible prison sentences if people continue to ignore the rules and the regulations. But the message is clear, coming from the advisors in China. The head of the Chinese Red Cross has been over in Italy, basically saying that an entire economic lockdown is absolutely necessary in the country, in the short run at least, to ensure that the numbers don't creep up any further, any faster.
Here in the UK, we heard Boris Johnson at one of his press conferences earlier, and he said rather optimistically, we think we can turn the tide on the virus in 12 weeks.
That's most certainly Boris Johnson putting a brave face on this, and essentially that's his job at a time of crisis, to try and rally the troops. A lot of leaders across Europe and also in the United States have used this kind of wartime rhetoric to invoke a sense of solidarity, but also to try and remind people of exactly how serious a situation their respective countries are in. Boris Johnson also went on to say that they're going to be ramping up testing, something that he has been perhaps arguably slow to have done in comparison to other countries in Europe doing so. That, people hope, will help us be able to identify people who have the virus or people who may have had the virus. People who may have had the virus may have developed immunity, and that may be a key to unlocking how to help people who actually do have the virus in the near future.
Let's hope so. Niamh Barker joining me here in the studio. Niamh, thank you. Well, US President Donald Trump says he's called on US health regulators to expedite potential therapies aimed at treating the coronavirus. Trump said he has approached the US Food and Drug Administration to streamline their regulatory approval processes. Trials on potential coronavirus therapies are already in the works. He also said one drug usually used for malaria has already been approved by the FDA to be rolled out soon.
This has been used in different forms, very powerful drug in different forms. And it's shown very encouraging, very, very encouraging early results. And we're going to be able to make that drug available almost immediately.
Well, for more on this, we're joined by our White House correspondent, Kimberly Halkett, who's in Washington. Hi there, Kimberly. So Donald Trump, again, another leader determined to deliver a more optimistic message.
Yeah, and in that rush to deliver a more optimistic message, not an entirely accurate message. Well, he was correct that he has pushed forward and directed the FDA to fast track some of these therapies. He announced that one of the drugs was going to be immediately available. That was quickly then tamped down by the Food and Drug Administration commissioner, saying that while they are radically pushing this forward, this malaria drug, it's not immediately going to be ready. So it was kind of a nuance to the message that not everyone picked up on right away, including myself, but indeed it is an important nuance. And it did at times appear that the president seemed to be speaking out of his comfort zone in terms of delivering this message. And that's maybe perhaps why this message got a little bit muddied. And that has really led to some critics on Capitol Hill questioning why the president is not allowing some of these public health officials to take the center stage with regard to the president's response and the response to coronavirus, especially given now that it's in all 50 states. And in the United States alone, there are now more than 10,000 cases and 150 deaths.
And Kimberly, are Americans reassured by the way that Donald Trump and the authorities are handling the crisis?
There continue to be questions about testing. There continues to be questioning about supplies. For example, celebrities and well-placed officials in society seem to, rather well-placed individuals in society seem to be able to get these tests quite readily. And yet ordinary Americans are still finding that they are not finding these tests as easily accessible as they were told. And we were told many weeks ago that if you want a test, you can get one, and that hasn't been the case. And although the number of tests have improved in terms of accessibility, it's still not out there for everyone. So that's one issue. The other issue that's not instilling a lot of public confidence is the issue of supplies. When you have the coronavirus task force saying, look, we're really happy that construction companies, for example, are now donating their masks to hospitals. Well, that hardly seems like a well thought out federal response. In fact, just the opposite. We have U.S. hospitals now requesting from Congress $100 billion in order to deal with some of the sort of influx of patients and the supplies that they need just to be on the front line in terms of the federal and U.S. response.
Kimberly Hackett there, direct from the White House. Kimberly, thank you. Well, cases of coronavirus in the state of New York have nearly doubled in one day to 5,200. More than 3,600 of those are in New York City itself. Well, officials are ramping up testing in an effort to slow the growth. Well, Gabe Elizondo is in New York for us. Hi there, Gabe. So what's the thought as to what's causing that dramatic jump in numbers?
Well, it's testing, and New York State has begun widespread testing really for the first time on Wednesday evening into Thursday morning. The governor saying that they tested about 7,500 people in the last 24 hours, and that is why we're seeing this spike in numbers that is going to continue to go up. In one side, that's the governor said that's a good sign because we're starting to identify who has it and we're starting to get them into the hospital. So that's, in some ways, we're seeing this bigger number. It's in some ways a good sign, he says. But the downside of that is that, they're testing 7,500 an evening in a city of New York City of 9 million, in a state, New York State, of about 18 million people. So you can see they have a big hill to climb here to get over this. To get a sense of how many people really in this city have this. There are 750 New Yorkers that are in a hospital, hospitalized with coronavirus, some in this hospital behind me, New York University Hospital. This is leading to the next stage of this crisis, as the governor and mayor call it, and that's a health crisis. Many of the doctors and nurses are saying that they just don't have enough of the basic things to help protect themselves. They're running on shortages of gloves and masks, and that is going to be a big problem moving forward. Both the governor and mayor of New York are imploring the federal government, Washington, to get more resources here to New York State and New York City, because this now, make no doubt about it, New York has become the epicenter of the coronavirus crisis in the United States. No other state, no other city in the United States has anywhere near the number of confirmed cases that we have here. It's a little bit to be expected because New York is the biggest city and state in the U.S., but what particularly worries people is this is also the most condensed area of the United States as well. So this virus can really get out of control very quickly, so it's escalating very fast.
Gabe Elizondo there live from New York. Gabe, thank you. Well, global markets are trading slightly up after major losses, thanks to several central banks scrambling to soften the impact of the pandemic. The Dow Jones in New York and FTSE 100 in London both closed almost 1% higher, but Trading, of course, remains volatile. It comes after the US Federal Reserve, Bank of England and the European Central Bank rolled out fresh measures to support financial markets. Still to come here on Al Jazeera. As India bans incoming flights, the Prime Minister announces plans for a 1 billion-person curfew. Zimbabwe braces for an outbreak with a healthcare system that's already been crippled by years of economic crisis. All that and more when we come back.
Hello, we were blessed, if that's the word, with 30 degrees again for Adelaide and Melbourne at least. I think Sydney joined in too, which is a fairly rare event for March. But you might get a clue from this arc of cloud here. It's not going to last. The forecasters drop things down to the middle 20s, at least for Adelaide and Melbourne and probably Canberra. This is on Friday, whereas Sydney's still at 36. That won't last either, because the cold air will eventually push that way and you're down to about 25 by Saturday. In Perth, the opposite's happening. It's getting warmer. More humid? Well, certainly warmer, but there are showers coming in to Western Australia, whereas the rain here just slid through Tasmania. It's on its way to New Zealand, and that's a wet and windy weekend on the way to you. Now, most of Australia is back in the sunshine. It's still quite hot for places, 36 Alice Springs, and where it should be wet, well, there's a hint of some decent rain south of Cairns, but not as much as you might want at this time of the year. It's a warming trend too at the moment in Japan and China, but there's still rain to come. No more snow, I don't think, not of any significance, but there's a tucking in of colder weather. 8 degrees in Sapporo, all the same, so as the thaw continues, and there's rain on the western side of Honshu. Tokyo's warmer than it should be, compared with the average. So is Beijing at 24. Hong Kong, wet.
Young women with a passion for space. I used to dream about working in a big cool company like NASA. A small step for science, a giant leap for womankind in Kyrgyzstan. We place it inside, and at a scheduled time, the satellite would be sent into space. Women Make Science, Kyrgyzstan Space School, Episode 5 on Al Jazeera.
Quick reminder of the top stories here on Al Jazeera. Italy's become the nation most seriously hit by coronavirus, with the number of deaths surpassing those in China. Spain's numbers are rising rapidly too, more than 100 dead in the past day, while the growth in infections in Germany is now ahead of that in Italy. US President Donald Trump says he's called on the Food and Drug Administration to streamline its processes to speed up the development of a treatment for coronavirus. The US markets have also recovered slightly. Well, while the global struggle to contain coronavirus continues, there is a glimmer of good news from where it was discovered in China. They reported no new local cases on Wednesday, the first time since the virus began in December. But as Scott Heidler reports from Bangkok, numbers are still growing in other parts of the region.
While countries across the globe continue to seal borders and lock down citizens, the country that saw COVID-19's primary infection for the first time reported no new local cases. In China, the only new coronavirus patients were imported from abroad. As construction and manufacturing resumes after months of shutdown, the epicenter for the virus, Wuhan City and the surrounding Hubei province, reported no new cases also for the first time.
We are delighted to see this 00 increase. This means today we have seen the dawn after so many days of hard effort.
There's been an uptick of infections in South Korea, this after a small cluster was discovered at a nursing home. To help offset the economic impact of the coronavirus, the government announced a support package to help small businesses. With two previous packages, the total financial aid now tops $39 billion.
We should think about ways to support those who have suffered from income loss or lost their jobs due to the coronavirus.
The Asian stock markets continue to struggle as concerns over economic disruption from the virus continues. South Korea's Kospi led most of the region's major markets in losses. Thailand announced its biggest single-day jump in coronavirus cases, at least 60. Some of them were people returning from a mass gathering of Muslim missionaries in neighboring Malaysia. Thailand has closed some of its border crossings with its southern neighbor. One of Japan's biggest tourist draws is cherry blossom season, now in full swing. But because of fear over spreading the virus, viewing parties and picnics are discouraged and events have been canceled. The Japanese government just announced that tourist numbers for last month were down over 58%. That's the biggest drop in 9 years since the tsunami and earthquake in 2011 that triggered the Fukushima nuclear disaster. Scott Heidler, Al Jazeera.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has ordered the country's 1.3 billion population to follow a one-day curfew on Sunday to combat the pandemic. The curfew will be enforced from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. as a test of the nation's ability to go effectively into lockdown.
The coronavirus crisis is very hard to control. There are many big countries that are suffering, so anyone who thinks it won't affect India is wrong.
Well, Elizabeth Puranam is in New Delhi.
Now, over the last week, things here have been really grinding to a halt. Schools, colleges, gyms, nightclubs, cultural, social centres have been closing. The state of Punjab decided to shut down all public transport today. And one more thing that the Prime Minister really stressed, which the Health Ministry also mentioned earlier in the day, and that's also something that people are going to find very difficult here in India, the massive challenge of social distancing. There are, as the Prime Minister keeps mentioning, 1.3 billion people in India. So many of them, 80%, work in what's called the informal, the unorganized sector. A lot of people work, out on the streets. We spoke to street vendors who told us that if they didn't leave their homes, well, their families would die of hunger. So that's just not an option for them. So how is this government going to contain the spread? It's doing everything it can to stop more cases from coming into the country. But of course, once it's here, it's going to be incredibly difficult for the government to tell people who need to go out to survive, to get by, to stay at home.
Well, aid agencies are warning that refugees are increasingly vulnerable to the virus. They say they're struggling to protect people in overcrowded and ill-equipped camps where many have already endured years of suffering. Mohammed Jamjoom reports.
A population so traumatized by violence, now terrified of a virus. In northern Syria, after 10 years of war and humanitarian catastrophe, medics are doing all they can to prevent an outbreak of COVID-19. Masks are being handed out, parents are trying to protect their children, but everyone seems to know it's not nearly enough.
We have very little equipment and supplies, not just right here, but in all of northern Syria.
In Bangladesh, where around 750,000 Rohingya from Myanmar are in camps, youth activists are teaching refugee children about the importance of proper hygiene. Anxiety in the largest refugee settlement in the world is on the rise. Warnings from aid agencies are stark.
Imagine then what it would cause in densely crowded refugee camps, community centers filled with civilians in a war zone, displaced people fleeing to informal settlements in places where there is little or no water, no washing facilities, little hygiene, and no healthcare.
In Greece, Doctors Without Borders has urged the government to evacuate refugees from overcrowded camps they say provide the perfect storm for a COVID-19 outbreak.
We have one water point for 1,300 people in Moria. We have one toilet for 200 people. And if we ask people today to call the doctor if they have a problem, there is no doctor to call. And if we ask these people today to isolate themselves, there is no space for isolation.
This week, the United Nations Refugee Agency announced that due to severe travel disruptions around the world, travel arrangements for resettling refugees are being temporarily suspended.
We are appealing to states and working very closely with them to ensure that movements can still continue for the most critical of emergency cases, wherever that's possible.
As panic over the pandemic spreads around the world, refugees and the internally displaced are, as always, just trying to survive. People long accustomed to uncertainty, for whom life has suddenly become an even greater challenge. Mohammed Jamjoom, Al Jazeera.
Well, Zimbabwe is yet to confirm any coronavirus infections, but the president's declared a national disaster and launched a response plan. All public gatherings of more than 100 people are prohibited as a precaution, and Independence Day celebrations next month are cancelled. Harry Matassa has more now from Harare.
Social distancing in many parts of Zimbabwe isn't easy. Victor Chakanyuka, like most Zimbabweans, has a casual job. But selling on the street, he's afraid of catching coronavirus. Public wash basins are being placed around the city, but cuts in the council's water supply means the taps run dry for hours, sometimes days.
Our country can't manage to cope with this pandemic disease. Maybe external countries might come and help.
Health officials say they are ready to minimize the impact of coronavirus should there be an outbreak. Wilkins Hospital is one health quarantine center in the capital where suspected cases are tested, but it only has a few dozen beds. The collapsing economy is adding to the problems of the struggling public healthcare sector. Launching the National Preparedness Response Plan on Thursday, President Emmerson Mnangagwa said Zimbabwe has other health challenges to deal with.
With our HIV prevalence of 14% in Zimbabwe, or slightly below, and malnutrition and other non-communicable diseases, especially among children, we are deeply concerned about the impact COVID-19 could have in Zimbabwe.
Zimbabweans have some experience dealing with disease outbreaks. More than 4,000 people died from cholera in 2008. Measures were put in place to contain that outbreak, but the threat of coronavirus has forced the government to take action and implement more drastic measures, which include banning public gatherings of more than 100 people. The ban on public gatherings affects church services, weddings and sporting events for 2 months. While there is no travel ban, people from countries with confirmed cases of coronavirus are being discouraged from coming to Zimbabwe. Zimbabweans are being advised against traveling abroad until the pandemic is under control. Mandatory screening has been intensified at all ports of entry. The government says screening will soon be introduced at all its offices. But with the worst economic crisis in a decade, many public hospitals are understaffed and lack basic equipment and medicine. Some Zimbabweans worry about the lack of resources to deal with coronavirus if it spreads. But government leaders say they are ready and on high alert. Harry Matassa, Al Jazeera, Harare.
As always, you can find our most important stories right in the centre of our website, all the very latest, what's happening from the coronavirus. And of course, you can find it at aljazeera.com. An update now of the top stories making the news here on Al Jazeera. Italy's death toll from coronavirus has overtaken China as the spread of the disease moves towards Europe and the United States. More than 3,400 people in Italy have now died from the disease, while China's death toll stands at over 3,200. Spain's numbers are rising rapidly too, more than 100 dead in the past day. While Iran's health minister said on average one person there dies from the virus every 10 minutes. US President Donald Trump says he has called on US health regulators to expedite potential therapies aimed at treating the virus. Trials on potential coronavirus therapies are already in the works, and he also said one drug usually used for malaria has already been approved by the FDA to be rolled out soon.
This has been used in different forms, very powerful drug in different forms. And it's shown very encouraging, very, very encouraging early results. And we're going to be able to make that drug available almost immediately.
Well, global markets are trading slightly up after major losses, thanks to several central banks scrambling to soften the impact of the pandemic. The Dow Jones in New York and FTSE 100 in London both closed almost 1% higher, but trading remains volatile. The US Federal Reserve, Bank of England and the European Central Bank have all rolled out fresh measures to support the financial markets. Well, while the global struggle to contain the coronavirus continues, there's a glimmer of good news from where it was discovered in China. They reported no new local cases on Wednesday, the first time since the virus was noticed in December in Hubei province. Well, as the coronavirus pandemic sweeps through the world's populations, aid agencies are warning that refugees are increasingly vulnerable. The United Nations Refugee Agency and Doctors Without Borders say they are struggling to protect people in camps. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has ordered the country's population to follow a one-day curfew on Sunday to combat the pandemic. The curfew will be enforced from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. to test the nation's ability to go into lockdown. Those are the headlines. People in Power is next. Bye-bye.
This is Adamo Suleiman's fourth trip to Buzi in 2 days. The fisherman's using his boat to rescue as many people as he can who are stranded in the flood-hit area after Cyclone Idai struck Mozambique.
When I first saw women with babies on their backs crying for help, saying they were dying, I knew I had to do something.
Hours later, and from the dark, a faint whistle in the distance alerts us to people calling for help. Women, children and the elderly are brought on board first, hungry and thirsty. It hasn't taken much time to fill the boat. About 200 people have been rescued and more want to get on, but there's simply no space.
In 2014, People in Power revealed the shameful treatment of disabled people in Romania's state-run care homes. Our investigation also raised questions about why the EU was funding some of those institutions. Now there are fresh allegations about neglect and mistreatment, this time not just in Romania, but in neighbouring countries. In the second of two special reports, Sarah